loathed.
Megaman X6 and X7. If you're even remotely familiar with the Mega Man franchise, you've heard no shortage of game reviewers and Let's Players lambast these two games as being the worst of the Mega Man X sub-series, and probably even the worst Mega Man games out of all the Mega Man sub-series. Sub-series is... whatever. Point is, X6 and X7 bad. But the reasons why X6 is considered bad are quite different from the reasons X7 is considered bad. So let's dive into these two games to gain a broader perspective of the types of design choices that ruin games, and how these failures basically killed the Mega Man X franchise. As many of you know, Mega Man X6 had a very rushed development cycle, with it being released less than a year after Mega Man X5. One of the biggest consequences of this hasty development was the atrocious English translation for this game. Not only does the poorly translated dialogue make the story a lot harder to follow, it's also a pretty big sign that you're about to get into a not-so-quality experience. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. Compared to previous entries, it definitely feels like a lot less care was put into the level design. Enemy placement is extremely punishing, ensuring that it's almost impossible to avoid getting hit constantly. The game demands leaps of faith from the player a lot more often, and thanks to the new Nightmare system, some levels will at times feature gimmicks that make the already shoddily designed levels that much more aneurysm-inducing. Fireballs constantly raining from the sky, suddenly limiting visibility. Who thought this was a good idea? Not to mention that the game has several ways of throwing you into no-win scenarios. Some levels are impossible to complete with Armorless X since he can't air dash, meaning you're left with no choice but to get a game over and go back to the level select. This is the first time a Mega Man X game wastes the player's time so flippantly, all due to a negligent lack of polish. And the hidden boss High Max can't be defeated unless you have at least one special weapon from one of the main bosses, effectively making him a punishment and actively discouraging exploration. All of this and more culminates in one of the most frustrating Mega Man experiences to date, especially for first-time players. Get ready to see the game over screen a lot. Good thing game overs don't really matter in this game since you start over from your last checkpoint regardless. For me, that is the one thing that kept me from rage quitting the game during my first playthrough. I believe this is one of two things that can make a player hate a game and remember it so negatively. Frustration. Of course, high difficulty could be a selling point for a game, some examples being Elden Ring, Super Meat Boy, Cuphead, and the like. But the difference is, those games are meticulously designed with intense challenge as a core tenet of their gameplay. Mega Man X6 is just sloppy all around, and dealing with the seemingly endless nonsense the game throws at you can get real old, real quick. While games such as Super Meat Boy are broken up into very short levels that allow the player to take on the game's intense challenges at their own pace, Mega Man X6, especially during Gates Lab, throws you headfirst into a gauntlet of BS. There's a big difference between intentional challenging level design and straight up broken level design, and X6 definitely falls into the latter category. Now onto X7. The big reason overall why X7 sucks so much to play is, say it with me, it is slow. From the story, which doesn't do anything interesting other than introducing a new character, Axel, to the gameplay, which lost just about everything that made Mega Man X fun. You run slower, dash slower, jumping off walls feels sticky and unreliable, and look how they massacred my boy Zero. His Z-Saber combos don't flow together in nearly the same way they did previously. He swings the sword around like a geriatric old man, and in 3D, you can't really gauge how close you need to be to the enemy to slash them. Even when playing as X or Axel, the auto-aim does all the heavy lifting for you. No more having to jump and position yourself properly to get an accurate shot at enemies. Instead, you'll often find that the gameplay is reduced to merely standing still and mashing the shoot button. I get why it was implemented, to make aiming less cumbersome and awkward in the 3D sections, but I think they should have taken a look at other third-person shooter games, or even their previous successful Mega Man Legends series, to figure out a better way to handle this. You gotta listen to Alia walk you through the most mundane things, like scrolling through menus, equipping chip items, even just saving the game takes forever. And even after you get past 1.5 million loading screens and menus, the game itself completely lacks flair. A lot of the 3D sections are just hallways without a whole lot going on, and bosses have an obnoxious amount of health, made worse by the fact that their weaknesses barely affect them unlike previous games. Yeah, it stuns them for a little bit, but the damage output is pitiful compared to what you can do with just your regular weapons. The game overall isn't unfairly punishing like X6, but there is nothing about it that makes me want to play it again. It's like the Sonic Forces of the X series. It forces me to go to sleep. I think these games should serve as a warning against two deadly sins of game design, causing frustration and boredom. One makes the player feel cheated, resentful, and like the developers are playing some kind of sick, sadistic game with them, while the other does the complete opposite of what a game is supposed to do, provide entertainment. Personally, I've seen a lot more hate directed towards X6 than X7 online, but I think X7 is much worse than X6. Perhaps this is an unpopular opinion, but I have my reasons for this. First of all, despite X6 not being of the same quality as its predecessors, it still plays and feels like a Mega Man X game at its core. The movement and control is fast, fluid, and responsive, just as you'd expect from the series. The graphics are great, bursting with color and detail, and shooting bad guys up with X or slashing them to pieces of Zero is still just as satisfying as it always has been. They really messed up the overall feel of the game when they tried to jump into 3D with X7. The feeling of slowness and stickiness that pervades the whole game just completely ruins the experience for me. Second off, another way to view X6 is as a challenge for longtime Mega Man X players. Even with games that are poorly designed, you still get a big sense of satisfaction from overcoming all the BS and managing to finally win after hours and hours and hours of trying over and over and over again. As frustrating as X6 can be to play, at least it makes me feel something. X7 doesn't make me feel anything, other than the urge to punch a hole through my monitor because these menus are so slow. Thirdly, I think the story is far more engaging in X6. X6 really gets you to personally relate to and resonate with the characters on a level we haven't really seen before in the X series. The 8 bosses you face off against are, for the most part, not just generic bad guys, but Reploids with tragic backstories that make you feel bad for having to put them down. Gate was never really a villain either, but the public feared his advanced Reploid creations, which led to him being shunned and outcasted, which in turn made him quite resentful. Fortunately, when he comes across a piece of Zero's DNA in the wreckage of the Eurasia colony, it corrupts him and he goes from a disgruntled scientist to an absolute madman bent on world domination. Aelia has to deal with the grief of watching her old colleague lose his mind and eventually get wiped off the map by X and Zero. X7 on the other hand, really doesn't do much to make me care about the characters or the overall plot. Axel is just a kid who ran away because he didn't agree with Red Alert's methods, so he goes to the Maverick Hunters instead. This sounds like an oversimplification, but I don't feel like there's a whole lot else to talk about other than X's very jarring change of character. This is another reason why I really don't like X7. I get that X has always been a pacifist at heart and he takes no pleasure in having to slaughter his Reploid brethren. But at the same time, he took his job as a Maverick Hunter very seriously and had no tolerance for the injustice or the harm of innocents, which is what drove him to fight in spite of his distaste for violence. In this game, he's content to just let Red Alert run around and cause havoc while he sits around Hunter Base looking for peaceful solutions, whatever those may be. I feel like this change wouldn't be quite so bad if the game went into more detail with what those peaceful solutions were, because the game honestly makes it seem like he's just lounging around the base looking up Reploid e-girls on the Maverick Hunter Wi-Fi or some other crap. You know, as someone who's working on his own video game, this was a bit of an eye-opening video to make. My game is an RPG, and due to not having a whole lot of experience, I have a hard time making sure everything is balanced properly, and I worry that people who play it will find it frustrating to play for that reason. But if my game ends up being frustrating to players, that's a lot better in my mind than it being boring, than it feeling like it has no soul or passion, than it feeling like a lifeless slog. X6, for as much as it's a broken mess, at least it still plays like a Mega Man X game should, and it triggers something in the player, a desire to overcome the garbage it throws your way. And you still get those nice dopamine rushes whenever you conquer one of the game's extremely difficult bosses, such as High Max or Gate. For me, when I play X7, I feel like I'm completely wasting my time. The game forces you to sit in menus for like half its runtime, and even when you're not sitting through menus or loading screens, the game has little of substance to keep you engaged, making it very easy to mentally check out. It, in my opinion, is a literal antithesis of what a game should be. But yeah, that's all for this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.